Bonjour, bonjour everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I am standing in a very peaceful little street in the outskirts of Paris. Parfait, parfait. Well, I'll have to, it's not really parfait because I'm supposed to hold my phone the other way, but I guess we shall make it work, my friends. So, oh, everybody's joining in, that's great. Perfect. Okay, so let's see. Bonjour, how are you? I'll do this so you can see something pretty. Is everybody doing okay? My name is Véronique, Véro. Online I'm known as French girl in Seattle because I lived in the United States for a really long time. But now I'm back in Paris and I am a travel blogger, a Paris-based tour guide, a French language instructor. And what I do is I share my love of Paris and France and French culture on my blog, FrenchGirlInSeattle.com, or on Facebook, France with Véro, on Instagram, and of course on my YouTube channel. So I hope if you haven't subscribed to said YouTube channel, you will do so very soon. Today, I thought I would take you in a really cool neighborhood. It's part of a larger city, really, that sits right outside my front door. And I know that a lot of you have probably never been there. So, oh, Maria, that's your first live stream. Well, I'm sorry that it started off on the wrong foot because I'm holding my camera the wrong way, but my apologies for that. I will do my best. So I'm taking you to the outskirts of Paris, and right now we are sitting east of Paris and right across the périphérique. So I want to show you what we are going to look at. Let's see. I'm going to use the same little map I used earlier this week. So you can see where we are. How about this? This is pretty good. You can see here. So this is Paris. You see Paris here? And you see the Paris périphérique, the beltway that runs around it, right? So we sit right on the other side of that. We are in Montreuil. A famous city right next to Montreuil is actually Vincennes. But today we are going to be in Montreuil. So really we're pretty close to Paris because you can see Metro Line 1, number 9, is actually here. So you can come to Montreuil with the metro. You're not that far from Paris, in other words. Okay? So I just wanted you to see this. Bonsoir.
Bonsoir. Je tenais sur l'appareil.
So these pretty homes that you see here are really colorful. And Montreuil is a very interesting city because you have a lot of little streets like this if you take the time to find them, where you will see this kind of pretty homes, quiet neighborhood, quiet little corner. Bonsoir Sylvain. And real life happens here. This is not a fancy place. And I will tell you more about the story of Montreuil and how it's been connected with the story of Paris. But you see, this is a very simple neighborhood. You have this little cafe here. It's called Le Pourquoi Pas, the Why Not. Locals come here. It's Friday night in Paris. It's right after 8 p.m. People are done with their work week and they're going to relax and unwind now and maybe go to a restaurant, etc. So I'm going to take you through a few streets. Bonsoir, Lachlan. Lachlan, I know you were happy it was on YouTube, but I set the phone the wrong way, so now I'm kind of filming vertically. At least you can see something. It's never perfect, is it? All right. Let's look at these a little bit. You can see that you are going to see a style of architecture around here that you don't really see in downtown Paris. Yes, learning curve. Exactly. So I want to show you why this neighborhood is a little special. This is the neighborhood that is part of a city called Montreuil that has very, very different types of neighborhoods. We are in one of my favorites. I call it the village because it's called le Haut Montreuil, le Bas Montreuil, with the lower part of Montreuil. And what you see on these walls, you see the stones. I'm going to talk about these stones later. They are known as les meulières, the Meulière stone, which has been quarried outside Paris since the late 19th century and was very popular mostly in the suburbs of Paris at the beginning of the 20th century, where affluent people would have beautiful homes built in the suburbs so they could come on the weekends, and they would use that stone, which is a very hard stone. You can see it here. It's used on this building with brick accents. This is not the home of an affluent person, by the way. This is more of a building, but you can see how the stone has been used as well. So I'm going to try and show you different styles of architecture in Montreuil, things you may not see all the time when you stay downtown. And I will, as always, tell you a few stories. Loud, loud, loud. I grew quite fond of this neighborhood. I live about 15 minutes away, walking time, and during the confinement, I spent many hours, 1 hour a day, that's all I could go out, and I spent a lot of time exploring all these streets and kind of fell in love with this part of Montreuil. It doesn't always have a good reputation in sections, Montreuil. It was working class and it still is working class. There are sections with high immigrant population as well. But there are always interesting things to see and interesting stories to tell, which is why we're here today. So I grew quite fond of it. I'm going to turn left very soon and leave this street, which is quite busy. So bear with me. You see this pretty little two-story buildings? You see them in the former faubourg of Paris. The faubourg were really the close suburbs, the neighborhoods that were really close to downtown. And you see them in Montmartre, you see them in the 14th arrondissement where I took you recently. Look at the wisteria, it's big. Now, at the beginning of the 20th century, in many neighborhoods, brick was used a lot to do some pretty creative things. Look at this building. This is an early 20th century building, and you can tell because the Art Nouveau architectural style that didn't last very long, about 15 years, it was gone by World War I, really inspired some of the buildings here. You can see the use of the blue or green ceramic for accents. You can see the use of different colors of brick. You can see it on this one even better. So again, these are not affluent homes. Montreuil was never a very affluent city. And I'm turning left now in what I call my happy street. During the confinement, salut, salut, bienvenue everyone. During the confinement, I walked here on many mornings. It was completely empty. People stayed home at that time. We weren't supposed to go out except for 1 hour a day. And I always walked through this street because it was such a cheerful sight with all the flags. So we went through jasmine, there were wisteria in bloom, and then jasmine and roses, and I saw it change throughout the spring. See, on a gray sky like today, which is not uncommon in Paris, it's been meaning to rain and it hasn't yet, knock on wood. I already caught the rain on the walk I did with you earlier this week. We are about to turn in a very special street. This street is called, it's called a villa. And it's called Villa de la Tourelle. It's a private street, so I'm going to be very discreet as I go in it. In Paris, you may have seen those villas or those cités, C-I-T-E. The villas were usually built for more affluent people, and they are pretty, often they are gated neighborhoods. And you see them, the best ones, the prettiest ones, are probably in the western arrondissement of Paris. Bonsoir. Bonsoir. Bonne balade. 16th arrondissement has some very nice villas. They're like gated communities in the US. This one is, because it's in, it's called a villa, but it's kind of in between a cité and a villa. But the fact that it is a villa tells me that it was for more affluent people. The cité was usually built for working classes, for the workers of a company. And you see a lot of these in the quartier populaire, the arrondissement where blue-collar workers were in Paris, where the factories were, the 19th, 20th arrondissement, the 18th arrondissement, and so forth. Very peaceful little street. Again, you see that stone on the facades here, the meulière. They are lovely. The people who live in those places are very lucky. Because once you're in here, you don't hear anything. The Villa de la Tourelle is named after a tower that was once here and gone now. And it's unusual because a cité or villa will often be in a straight line. This one curves at the end. It's an L-shaped one, so we will see that in a minute. So again, late 19th, early 20th style, la meulière or the brick, the pretty blue or green accents. I hope they show on the picture, those pretty colors. Really neat buildings. I'm trying to go slow so you can see the details. Here's one of my favorites here, because it has another distinctive sign, which is the awning, the glass and steel awning above the door called une marquise. And look at this pretty one. Gentleman is closing his green shutters. So we can turn now. I can't tell you what a happy sight this was during the confinement when I would come here very early in the morning and look at this. The wisteria, the roses, it smelled heavenly. Nobody was around. Each house has a nickname or a name. This one, number 12, is called Villa Germaine. Again, look at the use of the color on the railings, on the ceramic, and this stone I told you about. In fact, we can get closer here. It has kind of a reddish color when it's clean, and it has holes in it. And it's very hard. To me, it looks like volcanic stone. Sometimes they use accents to decorate the walls with those stones, so I'll show you if I see one. Here is Villa Céline. Céline is the name of this one. Now, one thing they always have in common in those cités or villas, but especially the villas, they're always behind gates. It's very French, but it's even more French in those villas. They don't want people in the street to see what's inside, especially the gardens, which could be in the back. Look at the roses. They're almost done now. And my favorite one is coming up on the left. This is my favorite one. I've taken several pictures of it. Climbing roses. Now some of them, you can tell, need some TLC. It's a lot of work to maintain those houses. A lot of money. Isn't that pretty? The French have a saying, to live happy, live in hiding. Don't make people jealous or envious. This theory or philosophy works really well with the new owners of this type of houses. They are the young couples we called bobos, bourgeois bohemian. I talked about them in another video, so I'm not going to give you the speech again. But they are young couples with means and young children, and they love living like this because they're not show-offs, but they do like very special places with a bit, a lot of history, and they love fixing up houses like this. Oh, it's very close to downtown Paris. On my bike, it's about a 10-minute bike ride. So this was the prettiest street I'm going to show you tonight, or the most, it's not that elegant, but it's special, isn't it? And then we're going to talk a little bit more about Montreuil. I haven't told you yet about it. Now, something Montreuil is famous for is the graffiti. Some people call it street art. Sometimes it looks like street art and sometimes it looks like graffiti. Yes, bobo can be a derogatory term. Some people will say it with disdain. Ugh, bobo land. And in Montreuil in particular, it's hard for some people because Montreuil has a history of being a working class neighborhood. The current mayor is a communist. It's pretty much a leftist city. So for them to have people with money here, changing the houses, changing the streets, changing everything, it's not always... Oh, the sun's coming out for you, my friends. Aren't you lucky? Haven't seen it all day. Now, why am I showing you ugly graffiti? Because this building has a story. I so wish I could be filming the other way. It would be better, but c'est la vie. I believe mistakes are okay as long as you don't make them twice. So here is part of the story of Montreuil and the nearby, more affluent city known as Vincennes. Vincennes is just 3 blocks away from here. Now look at this wall. Very colorful, lots of things. Now, do you see these gentlemen? Compagnie Générale des Cinématographes. Do you see the moon up there? We have clear references here to movies. And in fact, if we continue, we will see this beautiful painting here. I like this one. Let's wait for the cars. Do you see? It's called the Studio Albatross. Well, Montreuil and Vincennes in the late 19th century were very famous for launching the movie industry. You know Georges Méliès, the gentleman who did the movie Trip to the Moon. You can see the moon up there. That's a reference to that movie. Georges Méliès had 2 studios in Montreuil and stayed many years and did a lot of movies here. But most importantly, the Pathé brothers, P-A-T-H-A, we pronounce it Pathé in French, so I don't know how you pronounce it, had a big factory, a production unit, a studio nearby in Vincennes. And one day they bought this building in the late 19th century. This building had been a factory in the 19th century, we'll talk about that, and they turned it into movie studios. Max Linder, very popular cinematographers or directors came here and shot movies. But then before World War I, American movie studios were competing with them pretty hard, so it became hard to make money. And the Pathé brothers eventually leased out this facility to a group of Russian expatriates who had escaped the Russian Revolution. And so it became the Russian School of Montreuil. They made movies for many years, and the name was Studio Albatross. So the Russians took over. And eventually in 1928, those were all silent movies. The talkies arrived, and that was the end of the Studio Albatross. After that, they became a manufacturing facility again, and eventually They became a historical monument of France, and today they are a cultural center. So if the gate was open, you can go see exhibits there. There are a lot of things happening here. But really, French cinema, and in a way international cinema, was born in Vincennes and Montreuil. We always talk about the Lumière brothers in Lyon, who were doing similar things at the same time. But a lot happened here in the not so famous city of Montreuil. Yes, if you've been to Fontenay-sous-Bois, you would probably see a resemblance in terms of the architecture, the general feeling in some streets, etc. Now, Montreuil has been here since the Middle Ages. And Montreuil has a fabulous agricultural past that's really worth looking into. We are not in the right section to do this, so I won't do this today, but just know that because it was so close to Paris, they had vineyards all over the city. I mean, at the time it was a village. There were vineyards everywhere. People were growing fresh produce and they would sell it at the markets in Paris. But what really they were famous for were the peaches of Montreuil. It started in the 17th century, and in the 19th century, their peaches were so big and so famous, they had a very unique way of growing them here in Paris. So those peaches were so famous that they won a prize at one of the world fairs that happened in Paris after the Second Empire. So one day, I will take you to the place where they grew those peaches, because it's a very unique technique that was duplicated in other countries. But there was the agriculture, and then there was 19th century, the Industrial Revolution. Montreuil, like I said, was always a working class neighborhood too. And so by the second half of the 19th century, they had about 40 factories here. Look at this little house. See, they're not fancy homes, but they each have character and very different styles. So 40 factories were here. There was manufacturing, there were chemicals. There was a very famous toy company named JEP, J-E-P, that was open until the 1960s. The toys were made of wood, they were quality, they were sold all over France and all over the world. They also had a ceramic factory. I'm sure they used some of their products to decorate the facades. And we will talk about that too. Leatherworks, companies that worked with, animal skins and hides to make leather. I'm so lucky that the sun's out, because I think this really adds to the street here. Some of these factories were so big that workers had to come from all over France to work here. So the population exploded from the 1880s to the early 20th century. There were no schools. Schools were private or very small public schools, and schools had to be created. And at the time, the French government passed some pretty revolutionary laws, education laws. And Montreuil was able in less than 30 years, I think, to build 5 large school complexes to welcome all the children of all the workers who had come here to work. Here is a restaurant that's been closed since the confinement started. Le Jardin de Montreuil, the Garden of Montreuil. There are always references to gardens here. And they stayed closed, even though many reopened a couple weeks ago, because they don't have an outdoor seating area that's big enough to do business. So there's a sign on the door that explains they will only reopen at the end of June, because they're not set up to reopen now. But it's a charming place. I've been here in the summer before. I hope you're enjoying this walk in Montreuil, on the Paris outskirts at the end of Metro Line 9, east of Paris, in what we refer to as La Petite Couronne, the small crowns, the string of cities that go around Paris. They still have their menu. The formule. The formule is the prefix meal, right? Where you choose between your first course and your dish, entrée et plat, or your dish and dessert, plat, dessert, or you get all three for a set price with very limited options within that. So I can't wait for them to motorcycles. I can't wait for them to reopen. so I can come and have a glass of wine. I'm sure locals are the same way. Now I want to show you, I'm going to turn left in this street, but this is really interesting. For those of you who know the star city in the area, which is Vincennes, Vincennes is right across the street from us. So the Château de Vincennes, the famous medieval chateau, is about a 10-15 minute walk from here, a few blocks up. The Bois de Vincennes is a little bit farther up too. So if you're on that side, you're in Vincennes, which is a different département or administrative division. If you're on this side, you're in Montreuil. In fact, you see the sign saying Bas Montreuil, the lower Montreuil, the village where we came from. Now I want to show you this building. In the 19th century in France, a lot of people indulge in an architectural trend that was known as historicism, where basically it was a bit romantic. It was a romantic trend. They rediscovered the Middle Ages. They rediscovered past architectural styles. So it wasn't uncommon for people. Well, I mean, this was a hotel, and the gentleman redesigned this hotel to look almost like a chateau. And I don't know if you see above the door, above the first row of windows there is a head. It's a god. It's Hermes, who is the god of travelers. And so he put that there to wish good luck or welcome to his clients. That's right. I was on the Rue du Sergent Godefroy. Good for you, Bob. So I'm going to turn left here on the Rue de Vincennes. Oh, here's the cleaning crew. I've just hit the cleaning crew. And it's nice that the sun's out because it shows us some of the houses. The hardworking ones. So we will see a few more houses, and then we will delve into the industrial past of Montreuil. I'll show you a few landmarks, local landmarks, what used to be very big factories here. We'll talk about them. Look at this little one. And see how low they are? That's really something you find in the suburbs, in the faubourg, which are much closer to Paris than we are, or the towns in the outskirts. And look at the chateau from here, the hotel, the former hotel. Looks like it's a chateau right there. I'm going to wait for the loud ones to go by. Without getting killed. Voila. So between buildings, sometimes you turn your head, you see a big building like the ones I've shown you with the brick, early 20th century, and then you see a house that's stuck next to the building that's been clearly renovated, but maybe it's been here for a really long time, and if it hasn't, these have. So it's a mix, isn't it? There's no uniformity in style, but everything you see is quite typical of the Paris suburbs. Well, talking about historicism, people wanting to recreate past architectural style, there's a nice example coming up. Would you look at this one? Clearly that person was in love with the architecture of the past. I'm going to turn left over there, so a few more minutes on this street. Did you like that? It's a pretty building, huh? Trying to keep things stable for you. You have some nice colors on these facades on the other side. Montreuil can be very cheerful in places. They like their street art on the walls. They like to paint their houses. Oh, here's an opportunity to look at the Molière stone. Look at that. Look at the holes in it. And it's really rough. It's also very sturdy. And I like when they play with patterns. This one is just the stones that have been put inside the wall. But sometimes they do some creative things. If I see one, I'll show you. But this is not even a house. It's more like a building. And they still use the Molière stone from the outskirts of Paris. See the whole facade? It's all there. Where my parents live, you see a lot of very beautiful homes. Molière, the house is called Molière itself. It's just gorgeous. Oh, last peek at the chateau in the back there. See it? Nobody's in the middle of taking chances here. The reason it's quiet is because there aren't that many restaurants in this section of the street or the neighborhood, so people are out and about doing other things. More residential, you might say. Sometimes you see faded signs, and that tells you what either factory, we call them fabrique, when they weren't really big, we call them fabrique, the factories, and you can tell what type of business was here. Here's another one with the awning, the marquise outside. Maybe I should step out of the way. What fascinates me are the gardens that you can never see and that you just know are there. Like this is, several families could live in there and probably do, but look how big, there's a whole lot there behind those walls. We can't see it, but I know there's a great garden in there, completely private. That's when you get real estate envy in Paris. It's not the house I envy, it's the outdoor space, because I don't have one. More of the Molière on this side. I'll show it to you from... Look at that. So this whole building is doing the Molière on the first level. Very typical. And then the top level is brick with some accents to make it more interesting. And brick, of course, is a cheaper building material. That's why they use brick. Well, that's why they used, I should say, brick. That's pretty too. All right, so here we enter a street that's going to take us to the industrial past of Montreuil. Like I said, by the second half of the 19th century, there were about 40 factories here. Hundreds of people coming from all over France to work here, and maybe from other places in Europe, like Italians. Italians have always been the largest group of immigrants in France, and it started a long time ago. So this wasn't a residential neighborhood then. Yeah, it's nice when they name the houses, isn't it? Oop, let's let this guy go. You can see his license plate is 93 at the end, which is La Seine-Saint-Denis, one of the 96 départements in metropolitan France, and La Seine-Saint-Denis is where we are. But Vincennes, the Vincennes area where I live, is 94. It's le Val-de-Marne, and they touch each other. So to give you a good view of what I want to show you, you see these are the old fabriques or factories. This one is closed, but I know that some people actually live in there. They have, what's the word I'm looking for? Repurposed. They have repurposed a lot of the old factories to create those incubator stations that they have all over Paris and France now, where startup companies can set up shop. But what I like in Montreuil is that they have kept the past too. Do you see the name? Hugon Frères. That's the abbreviation for frères, for brothers. Hugon was one of the big families in Montreuil from the late 19th through the early 20th century. And their specialty is written on the left, peau sauvagine, so skins, hides, animal hides. So they made leather. And they owned this whole space. But now, like I said, it's been repurposed. It's called the Cap Kléber, C-A-P, Cap Kléber. Their offices here. Earlier this week when I was here, I met the concierge, the gardienne, which is over there in that little oasis. So here you have La Cuisine, you have another one. So I like how they repurpose the old factories. You see the wall in the back too, that was part of it. And the gardienne is right here, keeps an eye on things, makes sure everything's okay. So she is similar to a concierge. The concierge would be more in individual buildings. She played a very important role. I once wrote a story about La Concierge on the French Girl in Seattle blog, if you want to look it up, based on a testimonial from my wonderful mother-in-law who's lived in Paris all her life and told me stories about their concierge. So if you want to look it up, you will find it on the French Girl in Seattle blog. And if I remember, I might link it in the video notes where I always add information afterwards. Now, we're still in the same block that those two brothers had their factory in. On both sides of the streets, there were factory buildings here. I think I just lost you for a few seconds. I hope you're back. The connection probably wasn't that good. It seems like we're back in business. All right. So Cap Kléber continues here. So picture, we were down there basically, where that building is on the right-hand side, and we continued. So this whole block was the factory, the Leatherworks factory owned by these two brothers. Okay, we're back. I'm sorry the connection is not very good here, so I'm going to leave pretty soon. I'm going to go somewhere else, but I want to show you one more thing. You see a sign here, Chapal, Établissement Chapal, Chapal Establishments. Well, look at that. That's as industrial as it gets. The Chapal family was also a big player in Montreuil, and they also worked on leather, worked with really exotic animals as well. They opened in the 1880s. In fact, if I do this, you might be able to see a little bit what's in the back. The whole block is the former factory there. Sorry if I'm shaky. You can see the clock on the back wall over there. And the Chapal brothers were so good at what they did, how they treated leather in Europe. They eventually brought their savoir-faire to Brooklyn in the United States and opened a factory there. I forget if it was at the end of the 19th century or early 20th. And guess what they made? Their factory in Brooklyn made the bomber leather jackets for pilots. So this whole block, all the way down, is Chapal. It keeps going. And you can really see, I'm very short, but I'm gonna do this so you can kind of see a little bit. I see the clock on that back wall that probably marked the time and the end of the day for the workers. So you had the Hugon brothers, you had Chapal, and they were next to each other. And you have to picture this part of the city with about 40 of these factories, fabriques, establishments, making toys. I'm not sure what the water source was. That's a good question. Oh, thank you. Well, I have researched. I like to explore Paris off the beaten path, as you know. I get tired of hearing, I shouldn't say that, but I get tired of hearing the same stories that you hear about downtown Paris. So I always dig out stories because I'm interested in the details. And I find that in this type of neighborhoods, the working class. This is the old clinic that's been here since the 19th century. I'm sorry it's cutting off like that. I'm going to get back to the place where we were earlier, and hopefully that will help. So again, these are not fancy neighborhoods around Paris, huh? These are real neighborhoods where people live. You have the cafe, which is also a hotel, a two-star hotel right here, that takes care of locals. Nothing fancy. I'm basically walking in a loop to show you as much as I can. And then we'll wrap up at that pretty low street where we started with the flags. So thank you for sticking with me through technical issues today, connection issues. I love the sky now, it's turned really pretty. So I don't need to tell you that all these buildings were old fabric as well, old factories. I did some research a few weeks ago about what they did to create all these school complexes to take care of all the kids of these factory workers, and it's quite amazing what the city hall pulled off in the late 1880s, by the early 20th, in less than 30 years. 5 giant school complexes, and the laws had been passed saying in 1881 saying education had to be free, secular, and mandatory. So they had to build schools, and they did. We're going to turn here. Here's another Molière. You see? It looks like a leopard. It has spots. Not a fancy one either. Not the type you see where my parents live in the suburbs. But I do like this marquise, this awning. I always stop to look at it. Isn't that pretty? This is the back of the factory. It's very pretty. I'm sorry if I don't see all your questions. I try to catch them, but because I'm holding my my phone the wrong way. Blue skies, friends. We have blue skies ahead. So we're almost at the end of our loop. I have a couple more things to show you. So I think I'll do another Montreuil visit down the road to talk to you about the agricultural past of Montreuil and what they did with those peaches, because that's quite fascinating and very unique. Montreuil today is a mix of, like I said, very different flavors in all these neighborhoods and different types of populations as well. But it's changing fast, and in sections, gentrification is happening here too. You see a lot more cavistes, wine merchants, wine stores. It's cool because there used to be vineyards all over here. So it's nice to still have that connection, I think. This is so quiet. The best thing about being in Paris in June is how long days are. 10 p.m., it'll be 10 p.m. and it'll still be bright. And then it'll go down. Some graffiti on the left. I would not call that street art. Some people might disagree with me. One of my favorite things that street art did in this area is coming up, and I wanted to come here so I could show it to you, because I've looked at it for a while now. We are back on the rue du Sergent Bobillot. I love peaceful neighborhoods. Got used to it during the lockdown. I know there's a pretty home coming up. Look at this. How about, well, busy intersection for sure, but how about this house? And the wonderful garden, I'm sure, that sits right in the front here. Look at the color. It's like a very light pink, peach color. I don't know who lives in it. I don't know if it's one family or several. I can tell they've done work on the roof. And Montreuil is like this. You follow streets and you find very pretty homes. Never big, never pretentious. It's not the style of the neighborhood. Ah, here's my favorite piece of street art for a variety of reasons. Of course, the cars in front of it are not going to make it easy. I know, right, Sylvain? Peach in Montreuil, ha ha ha. Look at this one. This is my friend, I love this. This is street art, and I'll show you. So it's a big rooster, right? And you know, the rooster is the symbol of France, one of the symbols of France. But look at it closely. He has Paris landmarks, Parisian landmarks on his body. So you might recognize some. Here, I believe this is the Arc de Triomphe. And it has cogwheels too, like it's a machine. It's a machine. Where's my Eiffel Tower? Oh, it's coming up. Here's Notre Dame and the Eiffel Tower. And the obelisk. Isn't that cool? See, I like this type of creations. So when I walk around here, I always walk past this because I love it. The colors are so pretty. I'm glad I could catch it tonight. Bonsoir, Monsieur le Rooster. All right, and here we are getting closer to our Albatross movie studios. Now you know that when people tell you, where did movie industry start? Was it in Lyon with the Lumière brothers? Somewhat it was, but a lot was happening in Vincennes and in Montreuil as well through the Pathé brothers, P-A-T-H-E. Oh, the sky is blue. This is a good sign for the weekend. It's back. So here are the Albatross Studios, former fabrique or factory that used to make leather as well. That was a movie studio pretty much from the late 19th century through, I'd say, post 1928 is when the talkies arrived, so that's probably when they closed it. Okay, we're back. Yeah, I was saying I cannot tell who the faces are. All the faces are on the wall, but I know that this section is definitely a nod at all the people who played a This is a challenging broadcast, but we're almost finished. I am back in my pretty street with the flags, and we're about to walk past that private street that we saw, the Villa de la Tourelle. And that is where I will wrap up tonight, my little friends. I've wanted to take you for a while, but I hadn't had a chance to do it, so I'm glad we could do this tonight. One last peek at the pretty flags and the blue skies. Isn't that gorgeous? That street did cheer me up a lot during the lockdown. I'll never forget that. And here's one last peek at our Villa de la Tourelle that curves at the end, that private street. So here is Véro. I will do this so you can see the pretty street too, just like that. Thank you for being with me tonight. I'm sorry about the connection issues, and we had those on Zoom also earlier today, so maybe it's just not a good day for connections. I will share the replay on YouTube. It'll be there if you want to see some sections again. Did you enjoy it? Yeah, you know, I try to tell stories that, interesting stories that you need to dig out a little bit. It's more fun that way. So you all have a great weekend. I am going to tune off for the weekend because I have something really fun planned with a friend on the Paris, again in the Paris outskirts, where I seem to spend a lot of time. I'm going to be staying on the boat this weekend, so I'm very excited about that. And I will be back next week with more information, more photos. I'm glad you all had fun. It was fun for me too, in spite of the connection issues. I always like walking around Montreuil, and there's a lot more to show you. My plan is to actually start running tours in 2021, focusing on the Paris outskirts and places where most visitors don't go. So this is great practice for me. Merci, merci, à bientôt les amis. Au revoir.